Building painters in school districts get compensation of $98,000. Bus drivers make six-figure salaries.
Do they really? I think if you take a look at the overall package that public employees get, it's going to be richer than what you see in the private sector, simply because the private sector has had to cut back.
So does the public sector have to cut back? Can we afford it?
We've absolutely been cutting back.
Cutting back must mean something different for politicians. They do think they're special. Look at their surroundings. The camera is always focused on the protesters, but look up. The Wisconsin State House is insured for $200 million. The politicians who built it used 43 types of stone from 6 countries. They copied what royalty built in Europe. This is not unusual. Other state houses are grand. When you spend other people's money, you tend to spend a lot.
I mean, I look around here. This is frugal Wisconsin. This place is a palace.
That's why we don't add new things to it.
But the unions and liberals want new things like more benefits for everyone.
The question we have been asking ourselves around Wisconsin is, why do they have those health care benefits? Why do they have those retirement benefits? The question we should be asking ourselves is, why don't you? Why don't you have access to the same kind of health care choices that a public employee has?
Because if we all did, we'd be even deeper in the money hole. But there is another approach, one a few places have tried, and the result? Prosperity. That's next. Today, there's something new in America. A few politicians.
Like Governor Chris Christie in New Jersey, Governor Rick Scott in Florida, Governor John Kasich in Ohio. A few who do make cuts. But there's another governor you may not have heard of, one who cut spending far more and who faced even angrier protests. This happened in Puerto Rico 2 years ago. Thousands of union members clashed with police for days. They protested in front of the governor's mansion because they were upset that their new governor proposed cuts far bigger than Wisconsin's. But the governor just smiled and waved. Luis Fortunio says he had to make cuts because Puerto Rico's economy was a mess.
Not just a mess. We didn't have enough money to meet our first payroll.
Agrícola de Puerto Rico.
Fortunio's predecessors had grown Puerto Rico's government to the point that 1 out of every 3 workers worked for the state. And the state was generous about giving out contracts.
They couldn't care. The vendors will raise the prices, and they would just sign the contracts because it was not their money. It was the taxpayers' money.
As a result, by the time Fortunio was elected, Puerto Rico was broke. Fortunio decided the government would handle money differently.
We had to handle it as if it was our own money.
The new conservative majority, the first in Puerto Rico in 40 years, passed Law 7, which shrank the state.
So what'd you cut?
Everything. I started with my own salary. I froze all salaries across the government.
People must have screamed. You let 17,000 workers go.
If you can't pay their salaries, what are you going to do?
People called him a fascist, and worse, they said he should raise taxes instead of cutting government. We've heard that before.
Our taxes, as it is, were as high as they could be, actually much higher than in most of the country. So what we've done is the opposite.
He reduced corporate taxes from 35 to 25%. He reduced individual income taxes, and he privatized entire government agencies.
Bring in the private sector. They will do a better job. They will do it cheaper.
But government workers lost jobs.
The unions hate you.
Of course, they felt threatened.
They were threatened. You cut 17,000 jobs.
Some of them wanted to work with us and lower the government expenses, and some of them did and saved jobs. Others refused and lost jobs.
One fired government employee threw an egg at the governor.
You ducked.
I ducked. But bottom line here is, they will try to push back at the right decisions because a lot of people will rather stay comfortable in the comfort zone and not do what needs to be done.
The governor also cut his government's red tape. There was a lot of that, and that made it hard to open a business.
28 different business regulations and permits to open.
Crazy. Today we've got one regulation. That's it.
Didn't bureaucrats say, oh no, we need all these steps?
Of course they did. There's a permanent government.
A permanent government. That's common everywhere. Government employs hundreds of thousands of people, often just to shuffle paper, and those people lobby to keep their jobs. Like the police officers who did nothing but approve liquor licenses.
There were 250 policemen and women handling that.
Just liquor licenses?
Just to guarantee that you didn't have a prior record, criminal record.
This entrepreneur's mad because to sell marmalade out of her house, she had to spend a year getting government permits. She displays some on her wall. Even though her business is in her home, government rules required her to have an accessible bathroom. This woman's full-time job is helping businesses, mostly restaurants, wade through the maze.
I said, you cook and I take care of the government, and don't worry.
And now the new permit office says the rules are much easier.
It's helpful to have everything in one place.
Now she says it takes just 2 weeks to get permission to open a small store.
How about a copy of Give Me a Break?
This is my version of that. This one was in Delaware.
You want to buy a Fox t-shirt?
Delaware was said to be the most business-friendly state, but it still took me a week to get permission to do this. In Hong Kong, it took just 1 day.
Thank you, sir.
So the 2-week wait in Puerto Rico is still a handicap, but it's much faster than it used to be.
Do you hear now from businesses responding to that?
Of course, Walmart is expanding significantly, and Costco.
600 construction permits have been issued in the last few months. This drug company is expanding.
We're going to get more employees, up to 450 employees.
Coca-Cola's begin construction on a Dasani bottling plant that'll employ thousands.
There are a number of restaurants are coming in from the mainland.
Did you ever have a fired worker come to you and say, Governor, you know, I worked in the bureaucracy for 20 years. I would have never left. You fired me, but now I'm glad because I'm doing
Of course.
People like that woman selling marmalade. She used to work for the government, keeping historical records. Being fired was hard.
I feel bad because I have a big family.
But now that she started her own business, she says getting fired was a good thing.
I am my boss.
So good, she named her company Law 7, after the law that fired her.
It's good. For me, it's good.
And now, if a bar wants a liquor license...
Today you do it online.
one clerk on a computer.
Exactly, and that's it. So we have those policemen and women out in the streets where they belong.
Still, lots of people are mad, especially the government workers who lost jobs. A recent poll showed that if Fortunio ran for re-election now, he'd lose 47 to 25%. Fortunio says, so what?
I don't need this job. I'm doing it because I want to do it.
What do you mean when you say, I don't need this job?
I come from the private sector. I enjoyed what I was doing. I really enjoyed what I was doing.
You can go back to that.
And I can go back to that.
And over time, Puerto Rican voters may come to like his conservative government.
Thank you very much.
Ronald Reagan's popularity suffered when he made cuts. So did Richard Engler's in Michigan and Gary Johnson's in New Mexico. But all were later re-elected by big margins.
I didn't care to look at those numbers because I knew how it was going to be. And I was in Washington in the President Reagan's first term. I know how unpopular he was during the first 2 years. But he was doing a lot of the right stuff. At the end of the day, the numbers came back, and he won by a landslide.
Fortunio's advice to leaders who want to shrink the state?
Do what you need to do quickly, swiftly, like when you take off a Band-Aid, you know, just do it and move on to better things.
America's deep in debt and it's getting worse. What can we do? Well, there is another country not far from here that's figured that out. There they are, just a few hundred miles north.
Canada, the country of Celine Dion. Hockey. Logging. When I thought of Canada, I thought about big government health care and all that. And in fact, in the mid-90s, Canada's finance minister said, we are in debt up to our eyeballs. That can't be sustained. Their debt level was just as bad as ours is today. Almost 70% of their economy.
Just as much debt.
That's correct, yes.
But they fixed it.
They fixed it.
Economist David Henderson is a Canadian who left Canada before they fixed their debt problem. He's watched as his former country went deeper into debt.
The Wall Street Journal had an editorial calling the Canadian dollar the peso of the North. That was scary.
Because with the debt, the Canadian dollar was falling.
Yes. And Moody's put the Canadian federal debt on a credit watch.
The problem was that Canada's government had a safety net that was more like a hammock.
When I was growing up in Canada, people who went on unemployment insurance were said to go in the pogey. You could work as little as 8 weeks, taking the rest of the year off.
What would they do?
Playing hockey.
They play hockey all year?
Oh, yeah.
No work for most of the year. So, in 1995, Canadian leaders cut unemployment benefits and other programs, and as you see here, Canada's debt stopped increasing. And as Canada ran budget surpluses, its debt's been going down.
And things got better.
Things got better. The economy boomed in the 90s. Think about what government does. Government wastes most of what it spends. And so just cutting government spending and having that money be in the hands of people means it's going to be used more valuably.
Canada fired government workers, but unemployment didn't increase. It decreased from 12% to 6%. Their unemployment is still well below ours. And the Canadian dollar went from being worth just 72 cents to above the value of the American dollar today.
While job losses mount in the U.S., in Canada, there is actual job growth.
Now, they did also raise some taxes.
They did.
But the spending cuts were much bigger.
Much bigger.
6 to 1.
Roughly 6 to 1.
Agriculture cut 22%, fisheries 27%, natural resources almost 50%.
Right.
I mean, in the United States, they never use numbers like that.
Yeah. We should learn from Canada's experience that you can cut government substantially. It is so big, so wasteful, there's so much to cut without causing much real pain at all, and not just not causing pain, but helping your economy grow, helping people become better off.
We're throwing more money in the money hole.
Yeah, to take that particular money hole, in some states you can get unemployment benefits now for up to 99 weeks. That's positively French. So it's more serious here, and we need to move more quickly than the Canadians did. Unfortunately, it looks to me as if we're moving more slowly than the Canadians did.
Exactly. And while Canada cut and found that helped them thrive, we, south of the border, pour more money into the money hole. That's our program. Thanks for watching. Good night.